Welcome to the Face-to-Face Ministries podcast, the #1 resource for learning what it means to have a healed heart, connect more deeply with Jesus, and experience true and lasting transformation in your life. I am one of your hosts, Melinda Wilson.
And I'm your other host, Kathy Little. Please hit subscribe so you don't miss any of the fresh content that we're continuing to release. And while you're at it, we greatly appreciate your help in getting the word out by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving us a quick review.
You can also keep up with us by following our social media by searching face-to-faceministries.org on Facebook, and that has no spaces, no numbers, and no caps, and on Instagram at face-to-face-min, and that is all one word.
Our team also offers one-on-one ministry sessions that can be done virtually. And one of our favorite things to do is to train others to do what we do in helping others connect with Jesus. So if you want information on that, we can help you out.
Yeah, and for more information about all the resources, including what Kathy's talking about, our trainings, our events that we offer, visit face-to-faceministries.org. And while you're there, please sign up for our newsletter.
All right, let's dive into today's episode.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, welcome back. Very glad to have you here. Hey, we have something really cool we want to tell you guys about because, I think a lot of you know that we do training in the Emmanuel approach. And we've been offering this year-long program. And for some, that was too long a commitment and maybe too much of a financial investment. So guess what? We listened, and we actually have an 8-week program coming up just for you. It's bite-sized, less time, less expense, but totally jam full of value and training. It's 8 weeks beginning September 3rd, and we would love to have you join us there. This is for those of you who may not want to use this in your own practice or start a business or do this full-time, seeing clients. This is for you that want to learn it to implement it in your day-to-day life with your families, with your small group at church. This is the starting point of the training that we do, and you can get just that starting foundation part all by itself, which is pretty awesome. You can go to emmanueltraining.com/Emmanuel Foundations. And that's Emmanuel with an I because that is the Hebrew way to spell it. So emmanueltraining.com/Emmanuel Foundations, all lowercase. So we'd love to have you check that program out. We're excited about it. It's going to get started up here in September, goes till the end of October, and you have access to our healing community. You've got access to practicing in real life situations and learning all the basics. So we're very excited about that.
That is really exciting. And we do listen. We do listen to you guys. So respond. I love it. And I love that people are coming to Dash Away. If you're listening to this in a year or two, we're actually filming this in August of 2024, right before Dash Away 42 in Tahoe. And there's a few of you that are actually coming because you heard about it on the podcast. And we're going to continue to share these opportunities because it's exciting, and we just thank you for listening. And yes, we would love to see you in person. And thanks, Kathy, for relieving. I'm holding this phone with my arm. I'm like, how much longer can I hold it?
No, talk fast.
So we're so delighted about the conversation that we had with Felicia Murrell, like Pearl. She truly is a pearl. It was one of the most exquisite opportunities, experiences, interviews that I've had. She is truly delightful. And if you get to a chance to watch, please do, because you got to see her face.
Yeah.
She's just a bright, vibrant, smiley lady who emanates love. And so when we were interviewing her, I felt just so much love from her. And I'm kind of like doing hand motions, like if I could just describe what it feels like, it's like waves. And she was just so lit up in her face, smiley and joyful. Yeah. And so it was, I would say this interview was an experience.
Yes.
Interviewing Felicia Murrell. You're going to love her. To know her is to love her. And you're going to want more of her and her wisdom and her grace and her passion and her love. So I'm so excited to introduce to you Felicia Murrell.
All right, here we go. Thank you so much for joining us. It really is a treat to have you, and we've been wanting to interview you for a while now. It just took a little bit to get it scheduled, but very excited for our audience to get to know who you are and what you do, and all of the beautiful things that are important to you and that you are sharing with the world around you. So thanks so much for being part of this.
Thank you both so much for having me. I'm delighted to get to have this conversation with you today and talk a little bit more.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like there's a lot in common, even with how we met. Just for our listeners, we met Felicia at the Open Table Conference in June in Portland, and she was one of the keynote speakers. And she also did a breakout workshop. And when she led it, it was like, oh my gosh, this is so great, because it's similar to a manual, but really active listening, and listening to understand rather listening to respond. I mean, there's so much, but Felicia, we're pretty conversational in our style of interview, relational coming, and so are you. And I did read through last week when I thought it was going to be last week. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to read this whole book. But I Google books. I'll tell on you, or you probably know this. You can read portions of the chapters of your book, and I'm referring to your book called, Felicia,
It's "And the Restorative Power of Love in an Either-Or World."
So good.
And just, I don't know, there's something here, because just even as you said that, Felicia, I just felt like, whoa, like I got an air hug or something. I don't know. There's something about you. If people aren't watching, need to go and watch this, because Felicia's face and her smile is like, can we just have like this moment? Because I feel like there's some kind of something going on here. I don't know, just Holy Spirit juice or whatever you want to call it. So we're just going to sit here and have a meditation together and enjoy each other's company. So I was reading through this going, oh my gosh, I've just got to order it and read it, because each bit that Google Books for some reason chooses certain portions, they were like a delicious meal that you can actually take time to digest, but also that it is digestible. You weren't so philosophical that you're like, what is she saying? It sounds good, but I don't understand. But you are so relational, Felicia. Just starting, before we get into your book and some portions that I read, and then I wrote some questions from that, we would just love to hear something about you. Tell us about yourself. I know that's like a big question, but so here's the question. If you were to describe yourself, what are the first words or adjectives or phrases that come to mind?
Oh my gosh. I have never had the opportunity to think about that. That's so good.
I should have sent you an email before and told you.
Well, I was just thinking, my husband is always like talking about how I downplay myself. And so I would probably say salty and sassy. But I also like I just really, really I have a huge, huge mama bear heart, and I have to say it that way because it's not a weakness to it. So there's a fierceness to the way that I show up, but I have a high value for freedom, and I have a high value for allowing that journey for every individual person. And yeah, and so I think sometimes it could come off a little salty, sassy, maybe a little spicy, but it's so rooted. It's really rooted in the deepest sense of kindness and justice, and just a heart for people to be free.
I actually was writing some of that down. So if you see me looking down, it's I'm listening, and there's going to be things that you say that I want to come back to. And I feel like, hearing you speak at the conference, it was one of those moments of you'd say something and it would be, I thought, can we just land there for a moment? And so if I'm looking down, it's because I'm taking notes to be able to come back to that. But I just, in even just looking on your website, Felicia, it says you are a spiritual companion, speaker, certified master life coach, and former ordained pastor with over 20 years of church leadership experience. You also serve the publishing industry as a freelance copy editor. what part of that would you like to help us understand about you? What do you feel like for you is, this is who I am, or this is part of who I am, or it's what I do, but we just want to get to know you?
I think, you know what? I wrote this line in my book, and it's very true of who I am. I exist to love, right? And all the things that I do as vehicles and tools to love. I mean, they're just how I wake up and say yes to participating with love. So none of the things that I do are my identity. I don't attach identity statements to the doing, but people always are curious about what you do. And I do a lot of different things. The thing that I love the most is companioning. Like,
Mm.
I love it because spiritual companionship, as opposed to, um, I don't operate much in the world of certified master life coach anymore. I don't operate as a pastor anymore. And in both of those two roles, you're more kind of telling people what to do. People are coming to you, kind of like, fix my life, help me out, tell
Mhm.
me what to do. Right. And so there's almost this kind of more hierarchical thing where I'm over and above. You're expecting some wisdom and some expertise. And again, back to freedom being such a high value for me, I I I want us to see each other in the circle of life, um, in a power with kind of way instead of power over, right? And so as a companion, I'm just a fellow sojourner on this journey of being known and knowing just as you are, right? And so when I'm sitting with a directee, in companionship or companionee, whichever language people use, when I'm sitting with the person before me, there's enough space there for them to empty their heart, for us to listen to the goings on of their lives, to see where the divine, where spirit is showing up in the grace of that, right? And I absolutely love that. I love that because it's not, no one is asking me to be something or give them something. They just really need that space to be, to bear witness, to be listened to,
Mhm.
and to listen to, not necessarily to fix. And if there are points of intersection where I can share from my life and offer wisdom, that's great. But at the core of my day, when people ask me that, I the way that I answer it a lot of times is I am,
Mm.
right? It's just that active expression of being, and the role and function of that will always change.
Yeah. That gift of presence is so powerful. And just that companionship, the gift of presence, and just to have people have an opportunity to feel heard, to feel seen, and
Yeah.
understood and accepted wherever they're at. That's a real gift. And it's a gift, I would imagine too, that we have to learn that space of being and not fixing, and attuning without judging. And the exercise that we did at the open table modeled that. And I remember there were two gentlemen in the room, and the one just broke down crying because he was listened to, and the other guy struggled to not fix, but he didn't, because that was the exercise. And they actually saw the
Yeah.
power of how powerful it was just to sit with somebody and to hold space for them. So that was really powerful, and so true that that gift of presence can really matter and make a difference.
Yeah, I love it. I was a child who did not grow up with that. And I love your words there, the gift of presence. And I I really feel like so much of me was taught to shrink or to be small or to be invisible,
Mm.
right? In order to exist. And a lot of times that's how survivors of dysfunction grow up. And so maybe that's why this matters so much to me, or is so important. And I can remember even in learning to be present with the divine, and the presence of love, that agape kind of love, and turning face to face to face. When I first started sitting and having those quiet moments of just letting love wash over me, that I was so afraid that the eyes of love would be disappointed, that I
Mm.
would feel a sense of disillusionment, because I felt like I'd been a disappointment all of my life to
Mm.
all the people that mattered. And could God like look at me and actually be pleased
Mm.
or love me, or, you know, any of that expression? And I think coming to know that I'm loved because I'm loved because I'm loved, and to feel that love and to have my life transformed by that love, it's created in me this capacity and space that really all I want to do is give away that gift of presence,
Mm.
that gift of just that you can look in my eyes, that you can see a smile, that you can know that this is not the space where you have to censor what you say or be
Mm.
small or be
Mm.
invisible or shrink back. That all of the wrestle can be here, right? Not just the good and the polished and the pretty, but the whole of who we are, because we as humans we're complex. There's a lot to us. And I think it's in that light that that's where the healing and the transformation and the alchemy, as we saw in that powerful moment in the breakout session, that, yeah, something really happens there in
Yeah.
that.
Well, and part of your website, this follows on from that with a deep understanding of what it means to be human, as you were just saying. Felicia, I won't talk about you in front of you. She's great. Felicia's dedicated to empowering individuals, and I bolded this, to embrace who they already are and who love is inviting them to be. And when I read that, I thought, I wonder if that sounds a little paradoxical, because embrace who you are. And I like the and. I don't like the but. In fact, I've been even
Which is the
changing my
title of our
language.
book,
I
is
know.
and.
and I've been changing my language. And I studied improv for years, and it's and is like the first, you probably know that. It's and. So someone says something or creates a scene and you say and. You don't object. You don't judge. You don't try to make it change. You say and. And so adding to that. So it intrigues me. But I just want to talk about that, because how do you see embracing who we are, but also, and also letting love, you say it, who love is with a capital L, who love is inviting me to be. So that sounds almost like a transformation journey. How do we unpack that then, if I'm embracing who I am and also saying yes to this invitation of love, inviting me to be who I really am?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I really I'm so glad you honed in on it, because honestly, that for me is the whole of it,
Mm.
right? And I think a lot about, I won't be able to tell you where it is in the scripture, but somewhere in the New Testament, there's a passage about the wheat and the tares grow together, and to allow the wheat and the tares to grow together. And so I think about that statement in that same paradoxical way. Like, the wheat would be the truth of my being.
Mhm.
That's who love is inviting me to be. That's me coming into complete alignment with, Baxter Kruger used to ask the question all the time, do you believe what God believes about
Mm.
you? Right. And so I rephrase it to say, do you believe what love believes about you? How do I know what love believes about me? How do I get quiet enough to hear love's whispers and love's song, the resonance of the sound of love for my own being? Right. That's my redemptive story. That's the origin story of who I am. So that's the truth of my being. And I feel like love is always calling us into our highest self, our most true self, and to that. So that's the invitation of love. But you both know that we cannot even begin a healing journey without truth. We have to be able to fully see what's there, how it's there, how it shows up. There has to be an acknowledgement of who I am. And so much of society often comes at healing, at change from an external way in. It's always, this thing is bad.
Mhm.
You're bad,
Mhm.
it's bad, it's wrong. There's shame or guilt or blame, or something's wrong. It's from a negative kind of viewpoint that you want to cut off or change. And when you come to the truth of your being, then when you start hearing that song, that other side of that, of who I already am, I'm able to hold the depth, the messiness, the beauty, the radiant complexity of me. Like when I said I'm kind of salty, sassy, but I'm also full of love. Like, these are all the things that's in me. I know that I have the propensity to do things that don't honor my own humanity, much less someone else's. Why? Because I have been raised in an environment that was full of pain, that was full of trauma, that was full of dysfunction. And so I saw and I learned ways of being to protect myself that weren't good tools, right? And so when I'm triggered, I can go pull an action, a reaction, or a way of being that's not in line with my highest self.
Right.
And I have to own that those parts are in me. Those parts are in me. And when I bring them into the light of love, what I realize in that healing space is that love is not afraid of my messy parts. Love even begins to help me see and to turn with deep compassion and gratitude, even that trauma, even that suffering, even those actions that come of that space, right? Like I don't have to hide it out of shame. I can say, okay, this happened, this caused me to respond this way. It's an action, it's not an identity, right? And so when I talk about who I already am, some of these things that I have said I am are actions, not identity. And I have to really understand, when I get to the truth of my being and who love is inviting me to be and to come into alignment with, some of my actions were outside of who I am. Who I am at the core, that has never changed, right? And so inside of the prism of myself as a diamond and all the reflections of it, it's a very multifaceted response. As I'm becoming my truest self, I start to get to know the fullness of that. Whereas I may have only been reacting and living inside of one part of myself, or a protected part of myself, or a curious part of myself, or an intellectual part of myself. But as I come face to face and love shines on me, when the eye is clear, the whole body is full of light, right? And so now that my eyes are clear, I see the fullness of who I am. I see the wholeness of who I am. And so I think that's where I kind of like, the wheat and the tares grow together. I'm not picking out what I would judge as a bad part or whatever. I'm just letting all of who I am be me, with some curiosity, with some compassion, with a lot of grace. And then as I listen to the sound of love, I come really into the truth of my being. And I can understand how I've lived and moved in ways that are outside of the truth of my being, but why that was, if that makes sense.
Hey, Felicia, I know that when you reference love, you have a capital L, and you do
Yes.
that intentionally. And I have read many places where it says that God is love. It's who he is. It's his nature. He can't operate outside of that. God is good. It's his nature. He can't operate outside of that. So when you say love with a capital L, what are you specifically referring to? Just to clarify, in case there's any doubt
Yeah, thanks
anywhere.
for asking, because it always wrinkles people's nerves. And I try to be very, very, very mindful of audiences. When I reference love, I am talking about God, from 1 John 4:7 and 8, that God is love. Um, and for me, I make the distinction in my own life, because the God of my childhood, the God in church, wasn't a God that changed me.
Yes.
Love changed me, right? And it was knowing God as love. And in the Old Testament, where it says, it's a benediction, but the blessing of his face will shine upon you and give you peace. That was my journey with love, was sitting and love's face shining upon me. And in the presence of love, I was changed.
Yeah.
Um, And so I make the distinction that, but when I speak of love, I'm speaking of the divine or whatever name of God that people reference. For me, when I speak of love, I am talking about God. I am talking about the divine. All that means the same to me. I'm not like attached to the language in some in in ways that some people can be, but I want to be respectful of people's journeys and where they are. So thank you for clarifying that. So people are like, oh my gosh, what's happening? When I say love, I do mean agape love. I am
Yes.
talking
Well, I love that, Felicia. And I feel part of who I am is I'm not going to be talking about me, but I feel like you're doing this, and I'm so resonating with you that as I go through my own journey of getting to know who God is more, that the word God can be very triggering to people, because like what you're saying, it's come with all sorts of painful, traumatic things, and people doing things in the name of God, and manipulation and codependency. And well, God told me to not do this or to do this. And so that God is like little g, because if they're talking about love, the essence of love, they're actually not talking about who God, like you're the First John and beloved, let us love one another. Love is God. God is love. And so I appreciate this conversation, because I think it needs to be had more with people that have been followers of Christ a long time, Christians. Paul Young would say, "My people," just in that whole realm of I grew up in the church, of being open to go, oh my gosh, the God that I
Thought I
believed in.
knew.
Right. And Jason Clark, who you are friends with and we are, wrote the book Leaving and Finding Jesus. That whole thing of I left that God that was toxic, that I was taught, that wasn't safe, that wasn't loving. And so language is incredibly important. And those finding those words. So even Felicia saying, what is God to you? And I think it's a huge discussion of why there's so much division a lot of times, is that I'll say a word and I say tree, and that means one thing to you and it means something else to me. And now we're arguing over what a tree is. But if we can actually say, hey, what is a tree to you? What does that mean to you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Taking apart the language and sitting down with someone. And I know that's your heart, Felicia. I've heard that. That's why I feel like this book is about, of being there in a non-judgmental space. And part of that exercise was just listening to someone that we did at the open table, just referring to, was listening to their story without saying anything, without even saying, oh, I've been there, I've done that. And watching also how you feel inside when you're hearing them share their story. What's it pulling up in me? Or what's it,
Yeah.
That's
something that we're trying to teach the people that are in our training program for the Emmanuel approach, is how do we learn to sit with people without having to fix or feeling the need to fix or interject our own thing, rather than helping them connect and hear from Jesus directly. And I just want to circle back when you're talking about clarifying language and why we, like, some people have an inaccurate view of God. I keep thinking of this. I'm going to just share it for the comic value of it. But I've heard this quote, that in the beginning, God created man in his image. And ever since then, man's been trying to return the favor. Like, it's so true.
What God do you believe in? Yeah.
It is very, very true. Someone asked me once about, I'm trying to remember how they phrased the question, but the thought was that there are two things that are primary for healing in our journey here on the earth. One is healing the image of God, our concept of the image of God. And then the other is healing the concept of the image of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, okay, well, which do you do first or whatever? And I remember saying to the person, I'm not even sure that it really matters, because when you think about union and unity and the divine being within you, the two are so intricately interconnected. When my God concept began to be healed, I grew up with a God that was an enforcer, a punisher. It was all fire, hell, and brimstone. And I don't even remember ever hearing a message about a God in heaven who loved you. Like that idea of God as love was not a concept that I ever had. And so to be an adult and to hear for the first time, you have a Father in heaven who loves you. And he loves you because he loves you because he loves you. And he's loving you right now. And that, or reading Zephaniah 3:17 for the first time. And I'm like, okay, I read the Bible back and forth a lot of years. How did I skip over this dancing over you and delighting and leaping
Mm,
about, and where was this kind of thing?
mm,
And so as my image of God began to be healed, and I realized that I could come and receive this love unconditionally and to be present with God in a way that was loving. It allowed me also to be present with myself.
mm,
And I came to know myself in a deeper, more truthful, more healing
mm,
capacity. And some people, it's the other way for them. They do some self-help things, or they come into inner healing modalities. They go into therapy and they start learning about themselves, and they start healing and creating capacity and
mhm,
space to be with themselves. And from that
mhm,
space, then there's space and capacity to see God in a different light. I think the invitation, I don't know, it feels so parallel and similar to me inside of that, but you're onto something with how we change the image of that. And I try to do the same thing, even in speaking of love, because people have been so hurt, they go, well, I don't know about, referring to God as love. And I go back to 1 John 4:7-8. And I also say a lot of times what we have called expressions of love is not love.
mm, mhm,
And so when you look at 1 John 4:7-8, or when you look at 1 Corinthians 13,
mhm,
um, when you look at the way and life of Jesus, right, as a model for love, and the sound of love that's within us, we know healthy expressions of love, whether they come through the divine agape, through brotherly, friendly love, through intimate partnership love, through familial love, or just the kind of expressions of being. We know when something has that resonance and the feel and the taste and the heart of love. Um, and some things that we say are
mm,
definitely not.
mhm.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I, and that perspective of God when they are feeling like control or dominance or authoritarianism is love, because that's what they've been taught. Like, you must do this or else, with threat of punishment. And then they're raised that way. They're raised to see God that way. Then again, it brings us back to, what is the definition of God? How do you define love? How do you define God? And that feeling, it's funny because I was starting to read Tara's book, The Energy, and we're going to actually interview her tomorrow at Love and Love's Energy. And one of the things that she's talking about is you feel when someone loves you. It goes beyond what we can even say. I mean, I love 1 Corinthians 13. That just, like, hello,
Yeah.
that's right there. But what does it feel like to not be envious? What does it feel like for someone not to hold a record of wrongs? What does it feel like when you walk in the room and someone's face is lit up, right? We talk about this in brain science, and you feel it. And I feel like this is leading kind of into the embodiment question I wrote, because there's been so much detachment from in Christian circles. It's just true. I've been in this a long time. Detachment from our bodies, and like, oh, feelings aren't important. And I've heard that teaching too. Like, we can't rely on our emotions. We can't. It made you feel good. It doesn't matter what you feel. What does the Bible say? And it becomes, again, this transactional black and white thing of, this is it. We don't rely on feelings, but dang it, we want to feel good. Like, when we're falling in love with someone, would we want? Nope. We just need to make this a transactional experience. I love you. Yes. Okay. So anyway, we could do a whole drama on that, but I want to read something you wrote here, Felicia. Transaction aside, when I surrender to being me, ooh, right there. We just need to, oh, psh, when I surrender to being me, oh, see, I got to use some of this in my retreat next. I'm going to steal this from you, but I will quote you. And understand the gift that I am. I mean, we could spend all day unpacking, like actually feeling into that. Settle more deeply into my skin and bones and sink into I love this, a cosmic okayness. This is the redemptive beauty of incarnate living. This is Felicia's quote, not mine. I'm not that poetic. To fully embody myself as I join with love. Okay, so fully embody myself as I join with love. I know we could unpack even just the first 4 words of that, but I'd love to hear about your experience with becoming more embodied, why it is important that we're at home in our bodies, because you actually dedicate a couple chapters just to embodiment, being at home in our bodies, but it really goes along with what we're just talking about. Surrender to being me, understand the gift that I am, fully embody myself as I join with love. Would you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I would be glad to. I think coming from Christian spaces where, again, so much of religion for me felt like carrot on the stick dangling, and you're always chasing, chasing, chasing. And it's never ever quite enough, or it's never quite something, it's just you're just literally always chasing the carrot on the stick. But again, that carrot is outside of you. And you couple that with a lot of institutional churches, whether big or small, the usury factor, right? Like in the volunteerism, they're going to use you until you're burned out, and the consumption. And if our God image is that God uses us, we want to be used by God. We think that it's okay to be used in that manner, to be from the outside in. And so, in sitting with love and learning to be present with myself, what I realize, when you look at the Bible, there's a passage in the Gospels about the talents, how one person is given 5 talents and another 10 and another 2, blah blah blah. So you have this idea of God giving each person a gift, right? And then we're supposed to take that gift and use the gift to make Jesus famous, or for God's glory, or whatever the Christianese that is our brand. When you start sitting with love and the face of love shines on you, you realize that really God wants nothing more than to be in relationship. That's all love is, right? Love is not love if it's not relational. There has to be another person to commune for mutuality and reciprocity, and that kenosis, the pouring out, the emptying out of love from yourself over into someone else to happen. And so God is wanting something relational that we've turned into transaction. So when we turn back to this relationality, the gift is the gift of presence. It is your being. You are the gift. And however you show up in the world to dance with love is an expression of that gift. And that's what radiates. That's where the glory is. That's where the light of God shines. It's like lightning bugs everywhere, and we're all just dancing in our own lane, in our own journeys with the divine in this place. And what happens when we do that, why I use the word cosmic okayness, is because that eliminates the sense of competition and comparison. I'm over here in my lane, dancing with the divine, as the gift that he has called me to be, in whatever expression that comes out. I've sat with myself long enough to know that most of the gifts, how I use them, are public facing. They're speaking, they're writing, they're companioning. And then I have this gift of editing, which is an execution and a refinement kind of thing. But it also mirrors the other things I do, which is really a refinement kind of process. And so I understand myself as a gift and how I use tools and vehicles and resources. When you know that for you, and you know that for you, I'm not trying to compete or compare or take something from you. There's room for us to shine and radiate that light, right? And the embodiment part of that is me coming into the knowledge that, one, my feelings don't require fixing, neither do they require denying. They just require feeling, right? And if I feel my feelings, and if I'm comfortable enough to even drop down beneath it to see if there's a memory there or a story or something deeper that maybe love wants to share with me from that feeling, instead of escaping it or trying to run away from it or deny it, I might get to even know myself in a deeper way. And the feeling is a channel into the knowing, right? Ability of that through embodiment. The other part of embodiment and being present with the divine is, I think there's a real enlivenment is the word that comes to mind, but I'm just thinking about when we're quiet enough and still enough to feel the sensation of our own bodies, that in feeling the sensations of our own bodies, it connects us in a deep way to the vibration and hum of the earth, creation of other human beings. So there's a way through the body to come into interconnectedness and to see an expansive way of being that's not isolated or selfish or compartmentalized. We all are housed, humans anyway, we're all housed in bodies. And some of them move, some don't, but the ones that are alive and ticking, there's some vibration, there's some sensations somewhere, unless someone is paralyzed, there's some sensations that's happening in that. And even in the physical body, maybe having some paralyzed things, the heart is still vibrating. So there's still some movement. I'm just trying to get at the thread of our connection through embodiment that touches on something deeper, that when I'm not thinking of myself or holding that grace or compassion, I lose the ability to be with other people or to have a sensitivity and a connection for other people, right? And so I think we've done a disservice for me, I grew up Pentecostal and charismatic, and there was a lot of teaching about you subdue the flesh or you cut the flesh off. The flesh was bad, everything about, and we've equated the body and the flesh as the same thing when really they're not the same. But because we've had that language, we've done a real disservice at the unity of body, spirit, and soul in our humanity. And I think love is inviting us back into a wholeness that is really embodied.
So we didn't know how long this conversation was going to go, but I was telling Felicia we could talk to her all day and into the next day and into the next day. And we ended up cutting it into 2 parts because I think the conversation went for about an hour. It was an hour and a half,
you guys. So we wanted to break it up.
Yeah, so that you get Felicia twice, which is such a gift.
She is amazing. And hey, just a reminder, we have the basic foundations course available for those of you that want to learn the Emmanuel approach. Maybe you don't want to use it in a big elaborate way, but maybe just in practical ways, smaller ways. This is the on-ramp to our full year training, but we broke it off just as a 8-week training. So we'd love to have you come join us. Check out emmanueltraining.com/Emmanuel Foundations. And classes do start on September 3rd, go for 8 weeks. All right, join us. Thank you for listening to today's podcast. This is a listener-supported podcast, and if you have received value in any way from our content, we would truly appreciate you to partner with us financially, and you can do that by going to our website, facetofaceministries.org/give for tax-deductible giving. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.